What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here coming at y'all with another episode of our SEC in 30 Days theme. We are joined by Texas A&M insider and the managing editor of Good Bull Hunting. I love the name, by the way. Great website name, which is the Texas A&M SB Nation site. Robert Behrens is joining us today, and I just want to say I appreciate you coming on the show, man.
Absolutely, man. Pleasure to be here.
So, man, we got to start with last season. The 2020 season was a great one for the Aggies, and they finished 9-1. Huge bowl win over North Carolina in the Orange Bowl. They made a strong push for the Aggies' first college football playoff appearance. There's an argument to be made they should have been over Notre Dame. But for you, did this season meet, exceed, or fall short of your preseason expectations?
I mean, I think for an Aggie fan, I think you have to say that last year was an unmitigated success. Especially given there was so much uncertainty with COVID, and so many of us we didn't know if there was going to be a season at all. Let alone you didn't know how that was going to affect the players because you had guys opting out. You had so many different protocols. There was so much uncertainty throughout the entire season. It was a season I think a lot of A&M fans went into with high expectations. But that said, it really was kind of that. I feel like that prove it year for Jimbo Fisher. I had said early on that year three, it's not to say that year three was going to show us what his ceiling was going to be, but that you had to see that progress. If you see A&M show that potential to be an elite team, because in so many other instances, whether it's from Nick Saban to Dabo Swinney, Les Miles, even Jimbo when he was at Florida State. By year three, you're seeing those teams start to have those 10-win seasons, have they're challenging for a conference title. So that was something I think A&M fans wanted to see. And while we didn't make it to a conference title game, we didn't make the playoff. I feel like, given everything else that went on last season, given the fact that at the end of the day, we only lost to Alabama. Yeah, it was a blowout, but they blew out a lot of people. So, but yeah, going 9-1 in a crazy, crazy year. And like you said, finishing off with that Orange Bowl win, finishing in the top four. I think it was A&M's highest finish in about 50 years. So hard to have any complaints overall about that season.
Right. So, I mean, to kind of wrap up the 2020, so I got to ask you, what was the turnaround A&M and what was your personal opinion? Do you think A&M should have got that playoff spot over Notre Dame at that number 4 seed?
I mean, I'm obviously far from an unbiased opinion, but I thought that they deserved it only because, yes, A&M and Notre Dame both only had one loss, both of which were pretty convincing losses. But A&M's happened in week 2, following months of uncertainty and on the road against Alabama. Notre Dame's happened 2 days before the selection committee made their decisions, at a neutral site, and so I certainly felt like A&M should have been given the nod there. But I mean, it really was one of those, you could make the case either way. I'm sure, Notre Dame fans would be adamant that they're the ones that deserved it. But certainly as an A&M fan, or a fan of any team, when there's a legit case to be made that you deserve it, and I think there was a case for A&M, you're always going to feel like that you wish you would have gotten that shot, even if, we know we would have gone up against Bama again. There's a good chance they would have won, but I mean, you always want to have that shot at a title.
Right. I think there was arguments made for. I mean, we had a Notre Dame player on the show who said, just like you said, he thought they should have been in. A&M thinks they should have been in. Cincinnati thinks they should have been in. And when we had Oklahoma on the show, they thought they should be in because it's being the conference champion. So we got 4 teams that all think they should have got that last spot. But I want to move to a player that I don't think there's been a player that has drawn as much emotion across the country as Kellen Mond. 1 week, I mean, it's like this kid's unstoppable. He's going to be the next great thing. And then 1 week later, it's this guy needs to be benched. This guy's terrible. I mean, Kellen Mond had it rough, and I feel so sorry for him because it's like the wind could blow a wrong way, and it was Kellen Mond's fault a certain week. What's his legacy going to be at A&M, and what do you think his NFL potentials could be?
I think ultimately, like you said, he was a guy that, as far as what your impression of him was, what his legacy is going to be, was hard to nail down because you would have those crazy games. And we had the game in 2018, where he almost led us to an upset win over Clemson, in like the second or third game of the year. He led us in that crazy 7 overtime game against LSU, where I think it was literally his last like 7 pass attempts of the game were all touchdowns. And so he showed you those flashes of just absolute greatness. But like you said, would follow that up with games where, he's like, he can't hit the deep ball or he's not making good decisions. And so I think A&M fans certainly got frustrated with him at times. And part of that's just, the growing pains of seeing a guy evolve on the field and I think ultimately that's going to be his biggest legacy because he's a guy that he got thrown to the wolves essentially. His first game as a true freshman was that epic collapse against UCLA to open the season in Kevin Sumlin's final year. And so to see him go from that where, he was every bit the true freshman, really not ready for that moment, to, what he helped lead A&M to this past year with going 9-1 and in that Orange Bowl victory. I think that's going to be his legacy ultimately is just kind of being a big part of that culture change that we've seen at A&M, and hopefully in that turning A&M into a contender instead of just an also-ran. As far as NFL potential is concerned, I think he found a great landing spot for him, because he's definitely a guy that he has a lot of the tools, but he's not NFL ready at this point. I think he needs a little bit of work, and so he goes somewhere where you've got Kirk Cousins, who's the established starter, but Cousins is in his 30s. Cousins only has about 2 years left on his deal, so it's a great spot where maybe he can be there for a couple years, learn, develop, and then in 2 years, if Cousins doesn't get re-signed, then kind of that crack in the door is open for him to potentially challenge for that starting gig.
Right. And I mean, just one more follow-up. Do you think Mond should have came back and used that extra year of eligibility, or do you think he made a good decision going to the NFL when he did?
I think it was probably good for him to go ahead and, strike while the iron is hot. Certainly, I think, A&M fans would have loved for him to come back just for the stability of that position. But I think, especially, getting that 3rd round draft pick, I think absolutely go get your money while you can, man. And, he would have developed, maybe a little bit more staying at A&M, but you can develop on the sidelines of an NFL team and make a couple $1 million. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to make the money while you can. But now he's gone. There's a quarterback battle raging down in College Station. Haynes King, and then Zach Calzada. Do you know how to pronounce his last name?
Calzada.
Calzada. Okay, that's I was making sure, but they're fighting for the spot, man. This is a close battle. I watched the spring game, been kind of keeping tabs on this battle because I'm interested, especially as an Auburn fan. This is one of the division rivals, so I want to see who gets that spot. Being a quarterback for Jimbo is a difficult task. I mean, Jimbo expects a lot out of his QBs. What do each of these guys bring to the field, and who is your favorite to be quarterback one?
I would say my favorite right now is probably Haynes King. And I think for most Aggies, I think that's the guy that people either hope wins the job or just that they expect to win the job. And honestly, almost all of that comes solely down to he was the more hyped up recruit. He was a national top 100 recruit. He was, I think, one of the top dual threat QBs in the country coming out of high school. He won a state championship at Longview, which is, a kind of traditional football power in East Texas. And so he kind of has the pedigree. He has a lot of the hype behind him. And he definitely is more of the more athletic quarterback, because they say he is legitimately one of the fastest guys on the team. So I think he's the one that I think probably is the favorite, but also is the front runner just in the fans' perspective. But that said, Calzado's a guy that he has a whole year on him in the system, so he probably is going to know Jimbo's system better. And as you said, it's a system that it can take a while to pick up, and Jimbo can be really demanding on his quarterbacks. And Calzada, has a rocket for an arm. He was a guy that wasn't super highly rated as a recruit, but he was a 3-star out of a relatively poor performing team in Georgia. And he was a longtime A&M commit that actually Georgia made a big push to sign right before signing day 2 years ago. And he was one that we were lucky to hang on to be honest. So I think both guys have the skills. It's just going to come down to, who Jimbo trusts the most, who Jimbo feels like the team trusts the most. Because I know Jimbo has been quoted before that essentially he says the team will tell you who the starting quarterback needs to be, and that's what he always said about Kellen Mond, is that everything else aside, that Kellen was the team leader, Kellen was the guy that the team wanted out there on the field. So while I put it out there that Haynes King is kind of the guy I'd like to see, I'm not in the locker room, I'm not at practice every day, so I have full trust in whoever Jimbo puts out there game one, that's the guy that needs to be there.
Right. And I mean, the offense is important, and that's kind of been a staple for Texas A&M, even going back to Kevin Sumlin. The offense is elite. The defense questionable, but when I look at the Aggies this year, the defense returns 9 starters. I mean, that secondary has a lot of talent on the back end. Mike Elko has been tasked with rebuilding this unit. I think he's done an outstanding job at recruiting, developing talent. Do you think this is going to be the best defense that A&M has rolled out in a long time? And what do you think the potential is for this defense? Do you think it's the top 10 defense, top 15, top 20? What are you kind of expecting in terms of on the field performance?
Yeah, I would absolutely say I think this is going to be the best defense A&M's had in probably about 20 years. And that's, like you said, it's returning 9 starters from a defense that was, I think, pretty close to a top 20 defense last year already. And especially against the run, they were, I think, with the top run defense in the SEC. And not only just returning those starters, but also just getting Mike Elko back for one more year, because he's a guy that the past 2 off seasons you've heard in rumors around head coaching jobs. I think it's happened at Temple. This past year it was Kansas. So I think luckily for us, it sounds like while he's interested in the head coaching job, he's being patient and biding his time, waiting for that right opportunity. So, even if this is our last year with him, I think we're just trying to squeeze as much out of him as we can, because I think he's done a great job. And it's a defense that, more than anything, has shown the ability to adjust and has the ability to, when we're not playing Alabama, pretty much limit the big play. I mean, because that was the biggest thing under Kevin Sumlin, I think, that people just, pulled their hair out over was the defense. Because the offense was always pretty solid, but the defense, especially against the run, was just a disaster in a lot of ways. And so to see them rebuild that defense has been pretty impressive. And it's been, like I said, from the coaching side, you can see the guys tackle better, the coverage is better. But a lot of that comes down to recruiting too. And you're bringing in guys, year after year who are, 4 stars, 5 stars. And so that talent level is rising along with the continuity in the coaching staff.
Right. And I mean, even in spots where A&M lost people, they're bringing in people who I think are arguably have more potential than the person who might have left. I'm really excited for McKinley Jackson. That's one player I think he's going to be a stud out of Mississippi. My cousin actually played down there at George County with him. So I've known about his name, and I was really hoping as an Auburn fan, we could pull it out of the dark. And so I'm rooting for him wherever he goes. But I think that kid's going to be a huge factor on the defensive line. But it all starts with recruiting, man. Jimbo Fisher is the best of the best on the recruiting chart, right up there with Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney. A top 8 class for this 2021 cycle. 5-star Shamir Turner out of DeSoto comes in. He's a stud, too. Probably one of the best defensive linemen A&M has signed in a while. What were the biggest positional needs, though, for the Aggies this cycle? And other than Turner, who are some instant impact guys that you see coming out of this class?
Yes, I mean, the biggest thing about this class was exactly like you said, was kind of fortifying the trenches. Because Turner comes in and he's one of the few guys I think that could actually have an impact this year. Because that's maybe like one of the biggest compliments you can give this A&M team is that in the past years, when we got a top 10 class, that meant you were going to have like 3, 4, even 5 freshman starters coming out of that class. This is a class where it wouldn't surprise me if none of these guys are in the starting 22 come game 1 this fall. And that's just a testament to the depth and the talent this team already has. But I would say offensive line was probably the biggest need A&M had in this class. As you probably know, A&M had a great offensive line last year. It was one of the best lines in the country as far as run blocking. I think they only gave up like 5 or 6 sacks on the season, but they lost 4 of those 5 starters. And so now, while a lot of those freshmen aren't going to be coming in and starting and replacing those roles, when you lose 4 offensive linemen in 1 year, depth is going to be a huge issue. I would say out of the freshman class, the one guy on the offensive line that has a chance at probably starting is Bryce Foster. He's a guard slash center, but he was a 4-star. When I say a 4-star, he was like a top 50 guy. And you don't see interior linemen be like in that like high 4-star fringe 5-star rating. So that just tells you how impressive that guy was. But overall, yeah, this class, like I would say the most impressive thing about it, like you said, ranked 8th in the country, but so often you have a class that's ranked 8th and it's filled with like safeties and receivers and a lot of skill position guys. This is a class where, yeah, it's top 10, but like the guys at the very top of the class are guys in the trenches. And so, that's obviously been Jimbo's focus, is building from the inside out. And we're seeing the results of that on the field.
Right. And I mean, we see it every year. These breakout players come out of nowhere for these teams across the country. To compete in the SEC, you're going to have players step up into roles and be immediate contributors. So, looking at the roster right now, coming out of spring practice, going into summer workouts, which players do you have your eye on as potential breakout players for the 2021 season?
As far as breakouts go, obviously, there are several like guys that are, stars, like potential top NFL draft picks that I think everybody already knows. But I'll list a couple that maybe if you're not an Aggie fan, you might not be as familiar with. First of all is Damani Richardson, our junior safety out of Waxahachie. He started last year. He actually played a good bit the year before as well. So he's very established in his role. But I think this could be the year where he really breaks out and he just, you just see him all over the field making plays. And even in the spring game, he had a pick 6. So I think defensively, I'd say he's my big guy to really make a big impact this year. On offense, one player that is probably going to get overshadowed, but I think may surprise some folks is Baylor Cupp, who's A&M's technically our second string tight end. But don't let that label fool you, because he was a 5-star, like number 1 tight end in the country coming out of high school. Now it just so happened that like the past 2 years he had injuries in fall camp and it cost him his entire first 2 seasons in College Station. And of course, Jalen Weidermeyer took full advantage of that, who came in the same class that Baylor Cupp did. And Weidermeyer's now established himself. He's rated by some people as the top tight end in the country going into 2021. So obviously, you may have a logjam there, but it wouldn't surprise me if Jimbo starts using 2 tight end sets with those guys. Because both of them, I know for a fact Weidermeyer, he can block, he can, be in there on run support when he needs to, but both of them can go out wide and just create matchup nightmares for defenses. So I think that's something we can probably expect to see, only because you have 2 guys that are so talented that it's like it just makes no sense to not try to get them both on the field when you can.
Right.
And then and one more that's probably like not necessarily a breakout because he's already pretty known is Anais Smith. He's a guy that, he's played out wide. He's played in the slot. He's played running back when we needed to a few times. But he's a guy that just jack of all trades, and he's like just shifty and quick, and he'll do everything you need him to do. And he was one of those guys that he was a 3-star recruit coming out of high school. He was someone who he signed on signing day and was kind of one of those players that the rumor mill was that the only reason that A&M took him was because of the guys that they missed out on that were higher up on the list. But from the first game he played freshman year, you could tell the guy was a difference maker. So he's someone that I think, especially if A&M does have, maybe that offensive line isn't as good as it was last year. If you have a young QB, I think he could be a great release valve, a great short passing game option to just get the ball in that guy's hands and let him go.
Yeah, I like Smith a lot. I mean, he looked really good at some of y'all's biggest games last year. I mean, really carried A&M down the stretch. And also with the 2 tight ends set, I think you're going to see that a lot. I think this year is one of the stronger years of tight ends in the SEC overall. A&M has 2. Now Georgia has 2 with Gilbert and Washington. Billingsley at Bama is going to be a bigger role. So I think the tight end class in the SEC is going to be really one to watch. So I'm excited to see that. But looking ahead to the schedule, I think everyone understands you're in the SEC West. It's a tough schedule. Regardless of what you schedule non-conference, it's tough because you play in the SEC. Road games, though, I know this is going to sound crazy to some people, but Colorado isn't going to be an easy road game non-conference. They almost made the Pac-12 championship last year. Ole Miss, LSU on the road are 2 difficult environments. Then you still have Alabama and Auburn on that schedule. For you, right now, as we record in June, what is the ceiling and or floor for the 2021 Texas A&M Aggies?
I would say, ceiling, as much as it may be unlikely, I think the ceiling is 12-0 and going to Atlanta. Is that a tough road? Absolutely. But I think A&M's, they've done the recruiting. This is year 4 of Jimbo, not only Jimbo, but Jimbo with the same 2 coordinators for the past 4 years. So you've got the continuity, you've got the recruiting. So everything's in place for A&M to make a run if the chips fall the right way. So the sky is the limit as far as how far they can go. As far as floor, I want to say 9-3. It might be 8-4. Because it's like you said, there's so much unknown in the SEC because LSU was terrible last year, but you have to think they're still so talented that they're going to have some kind of rebound and come back to being a pretty good team. Ole Miss showed flashes last year, and so that's a team that I think everyone's going to be scared of them every week, no matter what happens. Like, that offense looks good enough that it could beat almost anybody any given day. So yeah, but that's life in the SEC. Is that from year to year, there's going to be some really great teams. You just don't always know which teams it's going to be.
Right.
And I was saying, one other thing for A&M is, as strange as it seems, we're playing Auburn at home this year, which normally would sound like a good thing, except for the fact that we have not beaten Auburn a single time at Kyle Field since we joined the SEC.
Yeah,
that's been a weird series.
As an Auburn fan, that Texas A&M series is just crazy. Every year it's a good game, regardless of how good A&M is or how good Auburn is. It's just one of those games you can never overlook. And I want to get down to Kyle Field so bad. I actually was supposed to go, and I think it was 16, and then I had something happen with a family member, and I couldn't go. And so I got on my list of stadiums I have to visit, but a kind of a follow-up here. We saw the Nick Saban, Jimbo Fisher back and forth where he was like, we're the next dynasty, and Saban was like, he's going to beat me in golf.
Yeah.
Not necessarily looking at that, but looking at how much pressure is really on Jimbo to get over the hump and win the SEC. We saw Auburn get rid of Gus Malzahn because he couldn't consistently get over the hump. You see programs in the SEC constantly get rid of coaches sooner than expected because of that. How much pressure is really on Jimbo right now?
I would say, certainly Aggies are hungry to take that next step. That said, because of Jimbo's contract, and that $75 million that we gave him 3 years ago, he's still got 7 years and more than $50 million left on that deal. So I think from a logistics perspective, there's not a lot of pressure on him because he's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Right.
But that said, I think certainly everyone wants to see the program continue to progress, and you want to see yourself in that upper tier of the SEC. But at some point, that has to include a trip to Atlanta. And I don't
Right.
think that has to be this year, but it's something that if that never happens, then certainly you look at that and you say, well, no matter what other like great things occurred and what great teams you built, like you didn't get where we were wanting to go.
Right. Yeah, and I always like to ask that question just because different. I mean, being an Auburn fan, we have the craziest expectations on our program just out of nowhere. And then I've talked to some programs, and they're like, "Yeah, there's never any expectations here. It's just get to 7-5, and you're good." And so I always like to kind of see what the tone of the environment is. But last question here, man. I said College Station, College Field's on my list of places I want to go. But for people who haven't been yet, we have this wonderful background. It was super easy to find. Like some stadiums, I struggle finding a good picture for the background for the interview. Kyle Field's not one of those. That was such an easy, awesome stadium. What makes this environment so special and unique on game days?
All right, I think the biggest thing that makes Kyle Field what it is the student section. A&M has 30,000 plus students at every game, standing up the whole game, taking up the entire, you know, basically the entire side of the stadium that's behind the visiting team. Um, and it's that combined with just the kind of unique traditions that A&M brings. It's not just loud. It's all like it's the yell leaders. It's reveille on the sidelines. A&M has so many like just little like, and some of them are silly. Some traditions are kind of off the wall, but it's all part of what makes going to a game there not just intimidating and not just fun, but it makes it a unique experience. And like you said, like so many other fan bases, it's you know there's 100,000 people there, but A&M hasn't had the success of an Alabama or even an LSU or an Auburn recently. So I think it's a fan base that's very hungry to have that success. Is very hungry to have those big games that actually mean something in November. So I think people are just kind of ready to burst at the seams if this team can finally get it over the hump.
Yeah, I'm excited because if this program gets into the playoffs, wherever it's hosted, like if it's hosted in like Dallas, I cannot wait to see those Aggie fans travel because I would bet it's 80-20. Because I remember I was a student in 2016 at Auburn when A&M came to visit. It was my first ever time seeing A&M play. I tell people all the time they might have outnumbered Auburn fans in Jordan Hare. They traveled so much. I was in the student section and I looked to my right and it was just maroon as far as I could see. And I was like, what happened? Did we just sell all our
Yeah.
tickets to the A&M fans? And I mean, they were loud and they're passionate, like you said. And so I can't wait to get down there. But man, I appreciate you coming on. This was one of the interviews I was looking forward to. A&M is such an interesting program right now. And so I appreciate you coming on. But where can our listeners find you? Social media, the website, all that kind of stuff. This time is yours.
Great, man. Well, yeah. So I'm a managing editor at goodbullhunting.com. And as you said, that's the team site for Texas A&M through the SB Nation network. And beyond that, you can find me primarily on Twitter, and I'm at RCB05.
Yep. So guys, go follow Robert. Man, I told y'all this is our I think second straight SB Nation guest. So make sure to go check out those sites. They got some of the best people writing for them. So make sure to go check them out. Also, make sure to catch some Texas A&M games this year. This program is going to be one you're going to want to watch. Y'all know where to find us, man. YouTube, any and all streaming platforms. Make sure to subscribe. Give this video a thumbs up so we can get this content out there. But guys, for Robert, for myself, and for the Blue Bloods, we are out.